I think the other point is that what's different is that there is a change in strategy. So we're not just about, because you mentioned the word, you used the expression pressure group. We're not just about putting pressure on the government. We're not just about, antagonizing the government, as Caleb said before. But this time we're saying, actually, we need to be able to partner with the government. We need to be seen as an organization, a think tank that can be the next source of leaders. And that's why we say we're ready to lead and ready to serve. So, if whichever political party, because we're not affiliated with any political party, we're non-partisan, even though we're politically aware. But if the next crop of leaders in Nigeria say, oh, we need to, the youth have been saying they want to be represented in government, but we don't see any of them who actually want to lead. Well, we want to change that. We want to get to a point where we're actually endorsing candidates, and we're putting out criteria for any candidate that's going to be endorsed.
So I think the key words would be engaging and also partnering, as well as just being involved generally.
Indeed. So that's a big difference.
Just to take you back a little bit, how old is GenVoices, first of all?
Maybe a few months.
Okay.
A few months.
How did you guys come together? If you can just tell me that quickly. How did you decide to be a part of this, and how did?
Yeah, I think it all. Obviously, the various individuals who are members of GenVoices all have a different story about how they came to the point of being as passionate as we are about the future of our country. But probably the most appropriate recent landmark event that sparked the birth of GenVoices was the Occupy Nigeria. And the Occupy Nigeria, which many of our members were involved in, was an instructive event in the sense that it awakened the understanding that perhaps a different strategy needed to be taken in dealing with the country's leadership and dealing with the leadership question in general. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people came out for Occupy Nigeria, made sacrifices, stood in the sun, and so on. And then at the end of it all, they asked themselves the question, well, what exactly did we achieve? And many people could not put their hands on what they had achieved in Occupy Nigeria. It was a laudable, objective, a laudable initiative, but it became clear that there wasn't significant strategic thinking around that. And so that's part of what has brought people together, is that the recognition that if you're going to achieve evolutionary change, without violence and without any of this sort of anarchy, then you've got to come together, think about what you want to do, and implement that strategy.
You mentioned something earlier that I want to touch on, because I know that one thing a lot of government officials always say when you sort of meet them, or at least when I meet them, is, oh, you guys are on Twitter, you guys are not in touch with the reality of the real youth in Nigeria on the streets. And you said something about how this is run by people who are not hungry. So how are you able to represent the Nigerian youth perfectly?
So fantastic question. I mean, and this is it. We were together at Occupy Nigeria with a few of us who are now part of the GenVoices team. And you see that on the streets, I mean, what we did that day, like I tried to emphasize before, the difference between our generation and the former generation is we're taking it a step further, right? So even though we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're there, we live in the Nigerian society. We drive through the Nigerian society. We work in the Nigerian society. And so don't be deceived that we have said that we're a bunch of people who are on Twitter. We're alive in the Nigerian society. Whenever something in Abuja happens, 700 kilometers away from us, it affects us. We feel these very things. We have people around us. We interact with the society. So we are unlike Nigerian politicians who are in bulletproof cars and skyscrapers. We live in the Nigerian society. So we're in the best position to say what should change and what should not. And you see, this is why our generation is very critical. Unlike the past, where it was more analog, we're here. We're on the ground, and then we have Twitter that takes us closer to the government. So even though we are not able to reach the government physically or have breakfast with them, when anything goes viral on Twitter, on Facebook, or any of the social media sites, it gets to them. Stella Odua in Abuja, something happens. The news it spreads across Nigeria. Why? Because one person tweets it, another person retweets. So that's how we can take the message from the physical location to the virtual location and to the people that we want it to get to. And if I would add to what Nwachukwu had said before, we realize that unlike our father's generations, where you had to gather people together under the sun, shut down the government, and incur irreparable damage to the economy, we're not doing that anymore. That strategy has to change. We're now saying, let's partner with the government and help build this system. So rather than fight what is, we would recommend what should be. We will build what should be and present it to the government and say, here, this is what you should be doing right now, and this is how you should do it, because it is not just going to be policy recommendations, it's going to be policy implementations, monitoring and evaluation. So we would follow through the entire change system that we are initiating. So while and you see, this thing is, somebody has to run the movement. Somebody has to coordinate the movement. Yeah. It is for the people. The movement is for the people. But we are trustees with that responsibility, that heavy responsibility to move Nigeria from where it is now to the future. But the movement, the change, everything belongs to the people. So it's going to be people driven. That's why I said it's going to survive us. It's going to survive our generation. It's going to survive Nwachukwu. It's going to survive me. It's going to survive the other GenVoices team members. So all that we have is the responsibility to get this movement started, moving, and hand it over to the Nigerian people. It's very interesting that you say all of that, because I know we're going to get to what's going to happen on the 18th and going forward, and how people should be involved. But I also say this because some of the biggest opposition that youth groups generally have actually come from the youth themselves. Yeah. Suspicion is a big problem in Nigeria. Everybody thinks, oh, you're forming this group. Like you said, the elections are coming, perfect timing for you to slot yourself in places and be relevant. And you also talking about partnering, with the government. When people hear words like that, they say, oh, you're already trying to place yourself. How do you sort of convince your peers that this is genuine? Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And, to a certain extent, these things will become obvious, in the fullness of time. When organizations that are driven by objectives that are not genuine come about, I should say, there's usually a lot of euphoria at the beginning, but it fizzles out, and it becomes obvious that, the people who were driving this weren't committed to the cause. I think another thing to emphasize is that, as I said earlier, and as Caleb elaborated on, we're not saying that the GenVoices will not work with the government, and that would be wrong. What we're trying to say is, it's one thing to criticize a government; it's another thing to come up with policies that can actually change and impact the lives of the Nigerian youth. So, if a particular individual who is in this constituency as a youth in Nigeria feels that the measure of genuineness is your refusal to participate or engage or partner with government, then unfortunately that's not our view. We feel that if you're going to change a country, the people who are blessed or lucky to have had a good education, to have exposure, to have professional experience, are precisely the people that have to come together and work with government. If you constantly criticize, then you put us in the situation that we're in now, because we are also of the firm belief that part of the reason why Nigeria is having a lot of the problems, the systemic problems we're having, is because people from the elite, people who are intelligent, people who are qualified, completely abdicated. They abdicated the political process. Exactly. And we're saying that is not the answer. Exactly. And so while you register your displeasure and you protest about certain things which you think are irresponsible behavior, if such a thing happens from the government, you've also got to have a practical way forward. And part of that practical way forward is is thinking through what the issues are, what possible solutions are, and having an opinion on the current policies,
that the government's implementing, endorse the ones that we support, and suggest alternatives to the ones we think are not working.